Hi, and welcome back to this free-for-all Friday edition of Focal Point on AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name, your congenial, convivial, and amiable host. You are listening to Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio. We spent quite a bit of time on this program talking about the race for the GOP nomination for Senate in the state of Mississippi. This involves a long-term incumbent, Senator Thad Cochran, been in Washington, D.C. for 41 years. He's being challenged by a Tea Party favorite, State Senator Chris McDaniel. They are headed into a runoff on Tuesday, very, very close in the primary. There was a third-party candidate that siphoned off enough votes from both Senator McDaniel and Senator Cochran to force this thing into a runoff. Senator McDaniel won the plurality of the votes, 49.6% in the primary. Senator Cochran took 49%. Neither of them got to the threshold 50%. The third candidate was eliminated. Now the race is down to Senator McDaniel and Senator Cochran. That is going to be decided on Tuesday, and the eyes of the entire nation are going to be focused on this race, much as they were focused on the race between David Bratt and Eric Cantor in the state of Virginia. So this race is generating a tremendous amount of nationwide interest. I will read 5 or 6 stories a day in the national media, Washington Post, New York Times, you name it, focused on the race for the Senate nomination in the state of Mississippi. So the entire nation looking at this race. It's drawing the attention of the Tea Party Express. American Family Association was part of starting the Tea Party movement back in 2009. I got involved in the Tea Party movement because the founder of the American Family Association kept sending out emails one after another, get involved with the Tea Party movement. American Family Association set up the very first nationwide website to make it possible for grassroots citizens to organize Tea Party events. So we encourage the formation of this movement, and one expression of that Tea Party movement is the Tea Party Express. And with us on our decision maker line is the co-founder and strategist for the Tea Party Express, Sal Russo. Sal, welcome to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Well, thanks very much for having me on.
Well, you're welcome.
With you.
It's great to have you on. And Sal, you've got some genuine street cred when it comes to the conservative movement. You worked on Ronald Reagan's 1966 gubernatorial campaign. You served for 3 years as an assistant to Governor Reagan, and then you were responsible for directing his reelection effort in the state of California in 1984. You have now become involved with the Tea Party Express, perhaps the foremost expert on the Tea Party movement. And you are in North Mississippi and will be in Northeast Mississippi tomorrow. So Sal, let's talk about this Mississippi race and tell us why the Tea Party Express has taken the trouble to come to the state of Mississippi, become involved in this, go on the bus tour. What are the issues here that make this race important enough for the Tea Party Express to get involved?
Well, I think the important thing to keep in mind is that the Tea Party was formed, really, it was almost spontaneous combustion when Rick Santelli did that famous rant on TV. And within the next week, I think there were about 60 spontaneous Tea Party rallies around the country, and it culminated in nearly 1 million people showing up on April 15th. And why that happened, because that doesn't happen every day. Somebody makes a comment on TV and suddenly 1 million people are mobilized. It happened because there was so much frustration that was pent up. Frustration with what's going on in Washington, and the fact that the Republicans didn't do a much better job than the Democrats did in terms of reining in the growth and expansiveness of the federal government's intrusiveness and what everybody agrees is an unsustainable national debt. And that's what got the Tea Party going, and it's grown from that point, and so we've always encouraged the power of the Tea Party to be wedded to the local groups because they're the ones on the ground. It shouldn't be a top-down organization, and that's what's made the Tea Party so strong. But part of that is the frustration with the way things are in Washington. And we don't have the philosophical battle, frankly, that we did when as you mentioned, and gave away my age inadvertently, When I started working for Ronald Reagan, which was before he was in public office, he was a Hollywood actor when I started working for him. The Republican Party was dominated by what we called then the Rockefeller wing, who believed that big government was the answer to America's problems. They agreed with the Democrats. The only thing that Republicans would say is we need to have a major industrialist run things, like a George Romney who was the CEO of American Motors, or Chuck Percy from Illinois, the CEO of Polaroid, or Nelson Rockefeller, or Bill Scranton from Scranton Steel in Pennsylvania. Those were their heroes. And, of course, we had Barry Goldwater and Ronald Reagan as our heroes. So that was a big battle. By the time Reagan got elected in 1980, he pretty much cleaned out what was left. We still had probably half the Senate. Republicans still wanted big government, but that was kind of the dying vestige of that idea. So today, I think that our leaders in both the House and the Senate are pretty conservative, but certainly compared to what they used to be like. Where the difference comes in is, are they willing to stand up and fight? When Reagan got elected in 1980, we had a bunch of the Republican leaders come to see him and say, Mr. President, there's no way you can get tax cuts through Tip O'Neill's house. You'll have to have another plan. And Reagan finally got mad and said, I may not succeed, but we're going to give it one heck of a try. And I think that's what the American people are saying. Sure, there's some good people that serve in the Congress, but they've, kind of lost their fire. They've lost their willingness and ability to fight. And I think that's a long way of answering your question, but put it in some historical context. That's the problem with Thad Cochran. He's a fine man. He was a real leader 40 years ago when there weren't very many Republicans in Mississippi, but he's gotten way too complacent and too happy with what we used to call last year, they kick the can down the road, same old, get along, and not actually do anything to solve America's problems. And it's not that he probably wouldn't want to in his dreams, probably does, but he's just lost that fire. And what we saw in Chris McDaniel is somebody who has the fire. He wants to go to Washington, not to be a big shot, but he wants to go to Washington to make a difference. He wants to get our country's economy going again, reduce the size and cost of government, get our debt under control, represent the values that made America great, that, people in Washington just have lost sight of. So that's what excited us about Chris McDaniel. And so we've been down here. We were down here about a month ago and did a couple of rallies, one in Biloxi and one in Jackson. I think we did a press conference with him on defund Obamacare a few months before that, and then we did an endorsement tour a couple of months before that. So we've been in Mississippi quite a few times, and we think he's going to be one of the good ones to fit right in there with the Ted Cruzes and the Rand Pauls and Mike Lee's that really turned Washington on its head.
Well, and, Chris McDaniel has been quite open about the fact that if he gets back to D.C., if he's fortunate enough to be sent back to Washington, D.C. by the voters, the citizens of the state of Mississippi, that's who he's going to run with. That's who he's going to hang out with. He's going to run with the Ted Cruzes. He's going to run with the Rand Pauls. He's going to run with the Mike Lee types and add his voice and his influence to theirs. And he's made no bones about that, about where his philosophical alignment is going to be when he gets back to D.C. Now, let me ask you another question. Talking here with Sal Russo, co-founder and strategist for the Tea Party Express. By the way, if you live in northeast Mississippi, the Tea Party Express will be coming through Tupelo tomorrow at about 11:30 down at City Hall, Fair Park. And Sal, let me ask you this question about the Virginia race. This race, Dave Bratt, a complete upstart, never held office before, never run for office before, had no money, had no name ID, and yet pulled off this shocking upset over Eric Cantor, who was the second most powerful man in the House of Representatives. And that was a jolt. I mean, it astonished me. I don't know if you were surprised as I was. I thought, well, maybe Dave Bratt will score in the 40s, and this will kind of be a warning shot across the bow, and he'll make the establishment Republicans kind of sit up and take notice. I never anticipated in my wildest imaginations that he would win that race by 11 points, an absolute total stunner. And I wonder what your reaction to that race was and what that might mean looking at this Senate primary in Mississippi, what that might mean for the Chris McDaniel Thad Cochran showdown?
Well, we had a little bit of inkling that something was happening because one of the Tea Party groups, Tea Party Nation, did get involved in that race very early on, and they continually were briefing us and kept telling us it's getting closer and closer. So I was not totally surprised, but it still was a shocking thing to defeat somebody as powerful as Eric Cantor. I had the good fortune of being involved in the campaign that defeated Tom Foley when he was the Democratic Speaker in Eastern Washington. And it's not easy to take out these very powerful leaders. The best shot you have is when they get so caught up in Washington that they lose sight of their constituents. And I think that's a big part of what happened to Eric Cantor. He was so busy being important in Washington, he just forgot to spend enough time with his constituents to see where they are. And I think that's very similar to the situation we have in Mississippi. My wife has family here in Mississippi, and we had dinner with them the last time we were through here, and they were saying they had always voted for Thad Cochran, but they hadn't seen him in 6 years since he ran for re-election. And so one of the criteria, we have 4 criteria that we use in evaluating candidates, and one of them is, can you demonstrate that you have strong grassroots support? And we do that for 2 reasons. One is, we want them to engage the Tea Party people and get them involved in the campaign, sort of a test for us that, local conservatives have tested this person out and think he's going to be pretty good. But the second thing, and maybe it's the most important thing, it shows that they talk and listen to people in their states or in their districts. They haven't lost sight of that they represent them, that they're not Washington's representatives back to the people, which some of these politicians seem to think their job is. And in the case of some of these people, and I think Thad Cochran's a good example of it, you ask, well, what grassroots people are supporting your campaign? They just look at you blankly. I mean, it just doesn't occur to them to ask anybody in their state what they think. They see their job kind of as arbitrating between powerful groups in Washington, and that's what too many congressmen do, is they think their job is to balance off the different lobbyists.
Sal, hate to cut you off. We're up against a hard break. Can't do anything about it. I appreciate you so much taking time to be with us. Sal Russo of the Tea Party Express in Tupelo tomorrow at 11:30. Thanks, Sal.
Thanks, Brian.